Hello and welcome to Today in Space. I am your space science podcast host from the East Coast, Alex Giorfanos, and we're coming to you here from Florida. I'm on Merritt Island. We're here for the Artemis 1 launch, and if you guys have been following us on Today in Space Pod on Instagram, or if you've just been following the NASA Artemis mission at all, you know that the mission was scrubbed, and we are waiting for the next possible launch, which is Saturday, September 3rd, at 2:17 p.m. Eastern Time. So we're going to be camping out. We're going to be there to cover the launch, the next launch attempt. And this episode, what I wanted to do was cover the balance, because there's a lot to talk about, right? As far as what happened with the SLS, why did the Space Launch System not launch? We'll cover that in more detail. I took some notes from that press conference, and we'll discuss what that means, the balance of SpaceX and NASA, and really talk about more about this experience of coming down here. I have already seen my second rocket launch of all time, which is amazing. That was on that Saturday night that I first got here in Florida, and that was amazing. I just pulled off on the side of a road, which is new and interesting in Florida. I guess that's just very, very common. If you're close enough to Cape Canaveral, if you're in Merritt Island, there are these causeways, these places where you can pull over and park a car, there's little openings right by the shore, and you can just set up and watch. There were people just coming out of work, coming home, just stopping over because they knew the launch was going to happen. And, SpaceX launched at night with some clouds. The first launch window, there were lightning storms. There were still lightning storms going on that night. I went to go for the first window at, I think it was 10:30, and then that got pushed to the later date. So I ended up driving a little bit closer to where I was staying, pulling off, and there was just a bunch of people there watching a launch. It's kind of magical to see this now. I can only imagine what the Apollo years were like, right? What that must have been like down here. I mean, all the houses are still of that era, at least in the area where I'm staying, right? As close as you can be to the Space Coast. It's that 50s style, 60s style, just one floor, flat roof, because Florida is just flat, right? Coming down here to watch this launch, and even the SLS launch that, I set up on Monday, that was a magical experience. But I don't want to get too far ahead of myself here. I do have notes. I do have a plan for this episode. But before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the podcast, whether you're listening to us on your drive to work, or you're listening to us at work, or wherever you are. Subscribe to us there, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. On YouTube, subscribe to us, hit that bell so you get the notification anytime that we put out a new video. We're starting to put out more YouTube shorts, but of course we also are on Instagram at Today in Space Pod, and Today in Space Pod on Twitter, El Greco, ELGR3CO on Twitter, and of course Today in Space on TikTok. Follow us there. You can keep up to what we're doing. We've been posting a lot of content of what we were able to view of the launch, and we're going to keep doing that. We had a video of the night launch, which I'm going to show right here, and that was really cool. I'm so glad that I got a new phone that can actually do some kind of night viewing, because I can't even imagine what that would have been like with my older phone. Just could not do anything dark. But then we took so many amazing photos and videos of the launch, and I'm going to talk about more about like where I went, the different places that you can go, because this is only Artemis 1, right? Artemis 1 is robotic. It's a test flight, and that's kind of the theme here of the balance, is that this is a test flight, and NASA is still learning their rocket. And Artemis 2 will send people for the first time to orbit the moon and come back, and then Artemis 3 is when they're actually going to attempt the landing on the moon with the first woman and first person of color to do so. One of the best things that I think I did was just kind of a thought. Again, I'm no photographer, right? But I wanted to make sure that I could capture as much as I could while I was down here. And I was trying to find a budget way of doing this, because the ideal way, you know, if you had the money, what would you love to do, would be to get a DSLR camera or a mirrorless camera, set it up, have all the great equipment, have a great lens so you can see as far as possible. But who has the money for that? I'm not at that. We're not at that point yet, right? But one of the budget ways I could do that, with all of the support you guys have given us through our 3D printing business, AG3D, where you can help, we can help you bring ideas into reality with 3D printing, but also you can help us fund trips like this. This is why we're in Florida right now, is because of your support with that. And of course, our sponsor Manscaped, which we'll talk about in a second here. Use the code word SPACE to get 20% off and free worldwide shipping. But that is all to say that I want to be a good steward of that stuff. And I don't want to just spend that money. I want to figure out different ways, especially if you're, as a citizen, as a human being, if you're going down to the Space Coast for any of these launches, whether it's SpaceX, whether it's the United Launch Alliance, whether it's the Space Launch System in the future, right? Artemis 2, 3. Those are missions that we're looking forward to, but you may want to make that trip down to Florida, right? So one of the things we did to help us capture the mission and get great views and test stuff out and make it be budget friendly was we grabbed one of these. And so this is basically a bird watching lens. It was 40 to 60 zoom. So it says here 1,500 to 9,500 meters, which really panned out well. And you can see in our first attempts, we went to the bridge that's right there in Playa Linda, and we tested out the lens, and it really turned out well. The only downside for this lens was that there's a cap that goes to the back of my cell phone, and that goes over the camera. There's a little hole, and then you put this right into the back of it, and you're able to basically piggyback the lens to look further than your phone can. So it gives me the quality of what the phone would be at, you know, a decent distance, and gets us to enhance it. It really, I mean, you can see by what we did, it really turned out well. And I was really happy with it. The only downside, this is where we had to use the power of 3D printing to help out. But the way that this hooks up to the camera is basically sitting right behind this lens. The lens is the thing that's actually on the tripod, and that was doing okay. Our tripod, we had bought this the last time we were in Florida, so it's been 3 years that we've had it. We've used it for all the podcasts to record stuff, so it's been around, and it's very thin, it's very light. So today we actually picked up a new one so that we can be ready for launch and be a little bit more stable. But even with that, the lens was relatively stable, but the phone to the lens was the thing that wasn't so great. You know, it's just putting a camera up to a hole basically, and the phone was just like shaking in the wind. And it, as you can see in this video here, like it just wasn't holding up to what we needed it to do. And on launch day, on that Monday, that ended up being much better, and there was less wind, and I had a nice setup. But what we ended up doing was, luckily, my friend who I'm staying with here has a Prusa Mark III, so we whipped together a quick little lens guide for stability that'll go right around the camera, so that this cap will actually encapsulate the camera, and that will prevent a lot of that shaking that it's doing from the wind. It could also cut out any kind of light that could, distort from the lens, but it's a cool little simple, it's a 2-minute print. But this subtle little difference to this cap, as we'll show you here, that's going to make all the difference in the world. So I'm excited to do that. Let's take a break to talk about our sponsor, Manscaped. Manscaped is here for all your male grooming needs, whether it's the Lawnmower 4.0, you can hear some lawnmowers in the background, they're getting to work. You need to get to work too. It's the summer, it's hot, I'm in Florida, I'm sweating all the time, and I am very happy that I have my Manscaped Lawnmower 4.0, and I've got everything I need to get through the heat, feel good about myself, feel groomed, and be ready for whatever comes at me. And one of the things as I was traveling down here that I realized was that I forgot the stand, because the cool thing about the Lawnmower 4.0 is that it actually charges capacitively, wirelessly, right? But the stand I forgot, so I was freaking out. I was like, oh my God, I had a crazy beard, and I was like, what am I gonna do? And it turns out you could actually charge your Manscaped device, your Lawnmower 4.0, if you have any kind of wireless charger. I literally was testing it out and I freaked out. I was like, yes, thank God. I have all the tools I need to Manscaped. I was good to go. Trimmed up the beard a little bit and I was ready to go. I'm all prepped because of Manscaped. And what you can do to help support the podcast is you can use code word SPACE. Get 20% off on anything on the store, free worldwide shipping. Use the code word SPACE. You get 20% off, free shipping, and that means that you support the podcast. And just like this guy back here, there's a weed whacker for anything that you need from Manscaped, whether it's nose hairs, beard, anywhere else on the body, and other stuff for your male grooming needs. So make sure to do your own manscaping, just like we're doing some landscaping back here. Get trimmed up, be good for the summer. Code word SPACE at manscaped.com, 20% off worldwide shipping. That's it, folks. That's how to support the podcast. Now back to the show. Setting up on Saturday for the first launch attempt, the first thing I want to say is that it is an absolutely magical experience. If you're going to come down for one of these Artemis missions, or any of these major missions that are going to happen here on the Space Coast, you really do need to do a little bit of research, and I'll share what I've learned while I was here. The big thing is that there's a lot of parking in these places where you can set up on the water, like we were talking about earlier for the night SpaceX launch. There's a lot of those, but if you really want to get the closest view, there's a few different places you could look at. There is Jetty Park, which has day passes. You know, if you're going to come down for a specific day on a launch, I would buy that pass ahead of time. I think there's like a 3-month pass for like $80, and then there's like a year pass for like $100-something. So if you're willing to spend a little bit more so that you have the flexibility, you don't have to keep buying a new ticket if there's scrubs, that's one way to do that. And there's a lot of different locations like that. There's also where we set up, which was Spaceview Park, which is a really cool little park. And they actually had, I think they were doing a NASA broadcast or it was a news broadcast. They had a tent set up, and people were getting there extremely early. There was also the bridge, which we can show you the video here. This is where we took our first videos, and then here you can actually see how busy and how packed that bridge got, which when I was there on the first day, that's all I could think of. So I was really testing out all that whole time, like, what could I do? Where could I go that this would work out? And what I ended up going to was Spaceview Park. So this is in Playa Linda. That's basically, Playa Linda Beach is about as close as you can legally get without being within the zone of danger from the rocket. And also you will be, you know, if you try to do that, you will experience, the military will find you. So do not try and jump the line. There are places that are blocked off for a reason. There was definitely more security for this launch because the vice president was flying in for this launch. And, right after that bridge was actually blocked. So I think ideally you could get a little bit closer on a different type of launch, but you definitely don't want to mess around. That's one subtle thing that, is not really, if you don't live down here, you don't live near a launch site, it's not obvious. But if a space launch, if a rocket goes wrong, and that rocket blows up, that rocket gets damaged, and fuel escapes, that cloud of fuel is no bueno. So the moral of the story is, wherever you go to watch a rocket launch when you're down here in Florida, or really anywhere that you go, the biggest advice I can have for you is get there early. Especially if it's a big launch like this. You really want to get there early because and camp out if you can. A lot of people were there way earlier than I was. They grabbed blankets. They camped out. Like it was those are the best spots that you can get. So definitely plan to go early. But most importantly, do that so that you can enjoy the experience. To be in the moment. Don't plan too much. I think if we're talking about the balance here, that's what this episode is. We're going to talk about the balance of SpaceX and NASA and the differences between those two. I also like to bring a little bit of the balance of being a human being. And one of the things that I've gotten better over the years of the podcast, and I definitely had to dial myself in for this launch, was to enjoy myself. And I got to meet some people around me. I got to meet Steve, who was sitting next to me, which was great to talk to him, fellow engineer. We talked a little bit about some working in manufacturing and talking about rocket launches and just being there. And it was, I'm really glad that I didn't focus too much on being able to do all the things that I wanted to do. One of the things that I wanted to do was go live for the broadcast and share that with you guys. And then I realized about an hour and a half before the launch window started, with all of those people there using their cell phones, the towers were getting slammed. There was just no way for there to, I was barely even getting texts, to give you an idea of the real demand of something like that. And with this launch now being on a Saturday of a holiday weekend for Labor Day, it is going to be packed with people, not only for people who have traveled to be there, but the people who live in Florida, who live in Titusville, who live near Orlando. Those folks are going to try and attend this launch because now they're not working like they would have been last Monday. So this is going to be an extremely packed launch. And for me, having gone to Playa Linda and gone to Spaceview Park and Jetty Park could easily be a very good solution, but I want to be able to be a little bit more spread out. I'd like my own private spot to spread out a little bit, maybe put out a tent and a covering to get out of the sun a little bit. That really wasn't possible in Spaceview Park. So there's a lot of things to consider. Also, at 7:30 in the morning on that Monday, that was when the heat really started to rise. And that, I was glad that I had as much water as I had, that I had some food, but there really wasn't a way for me to put out an umbrella to really give myself all the space that I needed at Spaceview Park, because it was packed. And we had originally set up, and then we all kind of like kept scooching more towards the front because people were either using it as a way to walk through, to go, further down the dock or to the gazebo that was there. Or there were people, closer to the launch window that were just standing in front of us, right? I was lucky enough that I had set my thing up early so that people were pretty clear that I was trying to look, I had something set up to watch the launch. But, this stuff's not guaranteed. So what I'm going to do, parking was $40 on that Monday. Tomorrow night, Friday night, I'm going to be going out and I'll be, I'll be paying for parking there. And that's going to be, I think, the best scenario. So I'll be in the Tesla Model Y, which I've rented for this week, which has been really cool. It's my first time driving an EV, and that car is pretty damn cool. So I'll be doing like a short video for the YouTube of just like what I've learned about it. I'm going to record inside the Tesla, which is going to be cool, and show it off to you guys. But yeah, looking forward to getting there and camping out and sleeping over for a rocket launch. It's very cool. But going back to the balance, we'll close out this episode talking about what happened and the little subtleties of Engine 3 and why SLS scrubbed the first time and kind of what to expect moving forward here. But the real balance for this week comes between, and I've seen this first person here in Florida, which is NASA's Space Launch System is a brand new rocket. And with the way that NASA has gone about doing this, it has been politically involved, so it has been a political football for a very long time for funding and for getting things done, which has made it cost a whole lot more. The contractors for SLS, how do I say this? Well, let's talk about a little bit of history, right? So SLS was originally in the early stages supposed to launch a very, very long time ago. Potentially even 2012 was the really crazy plan for them to have pulled that together. But realistically, the first year it was supposed to launch was 2016. The Orion spacecraft, which is on top of SLS right now, launched around the moon on top of Delta IV Heavy in December of 2014. So it's been 8 years since the spacecraft has launched. Luckily, there's some flight heritage on that. Luckily, there's some data on that. But that spacecraft has been in storage for 8 years. And SLS was supposed to launch in 2016. And then in 2020. And now we're in 2022. And we've had 5 wet dresses, essentially, of the SLS. And at this point, while we're very excited to see this thing launch, and we want nothing more than this thing to be successful, especially with how much money and time and people's careers that has gone into this thing, SpaceX just knows their rocket more than the Space Launch System. Through attrition and through time, SpaceX has learned the Falcon 9, the ins and outs. They've built systems to help automate the things that they know could happen. So when SLS has a problem with the sensor on their engine, this is the first time they're seeing it, so they have no idea. They only have the theoretical data that they have to go off of. What could be wrong? If the sensor is wrong, what could we know? With the Falcon 9, they're at this point where they're launching these things so often, and they've put it through its paces over the years. 150th recovery of a Falcon 9 the other night over in the West Coast. I've been here. I've seen 2 SpaceX launches in the amount of time that SLS has been on the pad and has already scrubbed once. There's been a Falcon 9 on the East Coast here in Florida that we saw on Saturday, and on the West Coast they launched a mission as well, and SLS still hasn't launched. And we're talking about the semantics of sensors that we'll get here in a second, that don't even necessarily have anything to do with the actual flight systems and what would shut down a launch. So the moral of the story, the balance here, is that if you take the approach of failing fast and learning faster, like SpaceX does, you have the advantage of, over time, learning the rocket and putting systems in place so that you can make this more routine. Is it perfect? No. But it's a lot better than putting a rocket out 5 times, saying that you're gonna launch, and then getting to the point where, you have to explain that, oh, well, we got a little bit further in the countdown this time. And, definitely it's frustrating. It's frustrating to kind of feel like almost that they don't know what they're doing. And I know that's not the case, and I know everyone is learning. I know that the Artemis team, is learning on the fly. We're trying to do this big, massive rocket that's in part using technology that we've known of the space shuttle, the RS-25 engines, but at the same time, it's a completely new rocket, and there's only so much that the theory can get you. When the rubber meets the road, when you finally... This is something that's very true of engineering and of science, that when you have the theory of it, when you actually go to experiment, when you actually go to put it down in real life and see what it really does, that's where you learn the most, and that's where you have to make your adjustments. If you spend too much time in theory and then hope and basically are banking on the fact that the theory is perfect, it's going to take you so long to troubleshoot and realize what it's really doing in real life that it makes it take so much longer. So even though SpaceX may have blown up a few rockets in the beginning, they have gotten to the point where they really do understand what they need to do to get these things turned around and fly these things and make them reusable, and make the missions more successful. And while they were highly criticized by the same people who are putting this rocket out there, this NASA's SLS, they are launching more than anybody else, and they're really doing it. And for NASA, they are doing the same thing that they are going through the same method that SpaceX has spent the years going through, and they are just not at the point where they're very good at it, and they're learning, right? They're doing something new, and I wish it was stated more like that. You know, NASA is human beings. It's filled with human beings. They're some of the smartest people that are there, but that doesn't mean that just because there's smart people there that it's going to happen. There are things that you need to do to make things happen in real life that require more than just being a smart person. There's different strategies that can be done, and what they're doing, you know, the NASA Administrator Bill Nelson brought up a decent point that I think is worth bringing up here, that adds to this balance, that essentially what they're trying to do with Artemis 1 is compress the Apollo missions. Now, Apollo missions 7, 8, and 9, which helped them develop the technology that they would need to eventually go to Apollo 10, where they sent the astronauts around the moon and set up the grounds for Apollo 11, where they actually landed on the moon. Apollo 7, 8, and 9, they are essentially compressing into Artemis 1, into this test mission. So they're already doing more than in the past NASA had done to progress to get to the point where they were ready for sending humans into space. So in some ways, it's good. Long term, short term, it sucks. Let's just be completely honest. Short term, it sucks to get everyone's hopes up, get everyone out there to make the trip to go see NASA's rocket, the America's rocket, right? The country's rocket. Fly up and send us back to the moon. It sucks that there are scrubs, and that the reasons for those scrubs are not great, and they feel like it should have been known, and it's difficult. But the good thing is that the team is experiencing the challenges, the team is troubleshooting the problems, and they're learning along the way and feeling the pain just like everyone else is, but more to agree, because they're the ones spending countless hours and sleepless nights and lots of overtime to fix those issues on the fly. I think for the long term, for the Artemis generation, for these missions that they're trying to do, I think it's good for them to experience this, because hopefully it will make them more resilient. They'll have faced challenges before, and they'll feel more comfortable facing those challenges as they get closer, when the stakes are higher with humans on board. But make no mistake about it, this mission is high stakes. Even this test flight of Artemis 1, this robotic test flight of the Orion system around the moon and back, and not to mention that they're going to be deploying cube satellites around the moon and going out of the orbit of the moon, that are going to be setting the stage for a lot of the things that they need for things down the road here. But when you compare it to the knowledge that SpaceX has of their rockets, it's just not comparable. And they have a lot of work to do. And like we were saying, if Artemis 1 is Apollo 7, 8, and 9, you have Apollo 10 being Artemis 2, where they're going to send astronauts around the moon to test out the systems with astronauts on board and come back. They're going to scope out the landing areas and learn the Orion spacecraft, where by Artemis 3, which would be Apollo 11, where they integrate the Starship as the human landing system, there's a lot that they need to do in a short amount of time. So this growth that NASA has to go from not sending any missions to the moon for many decades, they're doing a lot of that in just 3 missions. And the team is going to have to adjust and learn on the fly and really relearn a lot of stuff that has been lost over the years, and doing things that they haven't done. We can all relate to that as people, right? When you do new things that you haven't done in a long time or you've never done, it's painful, it's uncomfortable, and that's what they're going through. And we can all feel that with the scrubs and all the amount of time this has taken. Again, 2016 is when this mission was supposed to fly, and we're here in 2022, and launch attempt number 2 with a potential scrub for Monday, September 5th. So we're excited, but it is definitely high stakes for NASA. They need to get this right, and they can't risk losing that rocket or that spacecraft. That would be a huge blow to this program. But let's talk about the problem that did scrub Artemis 1. And I took some notes. I was able to listen in on the leadership team, both on the day of the scrub, the day after, where they came together and they analyzed what data they had on what could have gone wrong. And today I listened in on the meeting where 2 days later they've now addressed a lot of those issues, and they're still a go for September 3rd, 2:17 p.m. Eastern time. So let's go over NASA's SLS. So Engine 3 was the problem. Engine 3 had a sensor on board that reads the liquid hydrogen that is part of the fuel, right? You've got hydrogen, then you've got your oxidizer, which is liquid oxygen. That is in the core stage. Now, the core stage uses liquid propellant, and 4 space shuttle engines, 4 of the RS-25 engines. And that same fuel is used to cool the engines so that they do not melt or degrade or have issues, but it helps maintain the performance of the rocket and the bell of the thrust, where all of that insane combustion is going through, and there's an insane heat transfer. So basically what they've done is, just like on the space shuttle, they have to get the engine and the cryogenic cooling to a point where then the liquid fuel can go through there without turning into a gas, so they can use it more efficiently, and it doesn't immediately start to boil off, right? So on the engines, they're supposed to reach negative 420 degrees Fahrenheit. Engines 1, 2, and 4 were reaching about negative 410 degrees Fahrenheit, which is still not as cold as you'd like it, but at least within the window that they wanted. Engine 3 was only reaching negative 380 degrees Fahrenheit. So there was an unknown there that sensor was reading. It didn't make sense. There are plenty of sensors on the engine. We found out today that there are 5 sensors on the engine that can help verify and back up, and that the system on the rocket itself and the engine will actually monitor that stuff. It turns out that there are actually bad sensors on the SLS, these specific ones that they were talking about. Now, the thing that confuses me is that I heard in that first conference, I think it was on Tuesday, that the sensors themselves have not been calibrated since the rockets left the manufacturing facility. Now, that's a long time for those sensors to not be calibrated. Sensors, classically, if you work in engineering, if you work in anything with sensors are classically very easily out of spec, and having a good calibration is good because they go out of spec. You need to make sure, put in some kind of a procedure that allows you to calibrate it. The rocket was already on the pad, so the only way for them to have calibrated those sensors again would have been to take it back to the vehicle assembly building, and that would have meant unloading the rocket and bringing it back, which meant they were not going to make this launch window, which pushes them to October 14th, mid-October basically, before they could do this again. So that was not going to happen. So what they decided to do was do a risk assessment, go look at those sensors and any other sensors that they had to see if they could verify if there was actually good liquid hydrogen going through. Was it reaching the right temperature? And they have sensors on the pad, they have sensors in the engine, and they have sensors in the core stage. We found out that the 5 sensors on the engine were looking good. The sensors on the core stage were looking good, which means that that sensor was bad. Even the other 3 sensors were reading a little bit warmer than, like we said, the minus 410 degrees Fahrenheit. And the bleed system that they were using also had a leak as well. They fixed that. And the bleed system is really important because that's what helps take out the heat for the line. So when there was concern that wasn't working, that's a big issue. But now that we know that the sensors were faulty, it looks like they do have good liquid hydrogen going through the rocket. So a lot of the concerns from earlier in the week seem to be now out. But the strange thing, again, that we heard is that the sensors that they were worried about are actually not involved with the sensors on the rocket or the engine. So they don't even have to do anything to fake out the systems on board that will take over once they get to the point where they're going to launch. Which begs the question, why were we even worried about those sensors in the first place? And this goes back to this balance that this is a new rocket. They don't know what they don't know. They don't know a lot about the system until they get it out to the pad and they try it. And that's where the SpaceX mindset is good, because you've seen it so many times. You've hit the ball so many times, to use another analogy. Like, you have hands-on experience, and you cannot replace that very easily, especially with rockets. So even though it's very frustrating, they have to go through this. It's part of the experience. And what they can't do is have a big misfire, literally, and ruin that rocket. So they're being very cautious, but this could have been done over the last 6 years. Like there's so much that they need to catch up on in such a short amount of time. So a lot of what we've been hearing is a little frustrating, because if they just had a different approach, this could have been done differently, but we are where we are. Some other subtleties about Engine 3, we found out that the line that goes to Engine 3 is actually longer than the other engines. So there was also a concern that maybe because of the position of Engine 3 and the piping that leads down to it, maybe because it was longer and because it was in that special spot, maybe that was the reason why it wasn't getting heat. But all that being said, it looks like things are good, and that they're at least, they've analyzed the risk and they're ready to go. There was also a crack in the foam insulation, which wasn't an issue, but it is still a risk for the flight, where if it breaks off and impacts the side boosters, there could be some risk, but they're willing to take that risk. And at the end of the day, you're never going to launch without any risk. And there is definitely a risk assessment. What was the term that they used that I thought was very interesting? Risk acceptance rationale. And hearing the risk and how strange it is that one sensor is not even involved with the actual system that takes over. Again, I'm very confused by that. The reason why that was to blame for the launch, when in reality there really wasn't a good weather for the launch anyways inside that window. There was not even even if everything had gone well, the weather, there was rain going over the pad and a weather system developing too close. So there is definitely a line of figuring out what risk is acceptable. I think there's still a lot of growth that NASA needs to go through for accepting risk. They haven't had to accept risks like this in a very long time. So they're learning a lot very, very quickly. If we go further here, some of the things that they're changing, they're going to be, as far as procedurally, they're going to be actually loading the liquid hydrogen chill down at the same time as liquid oxygen, and that's going to help them have a little bit more time for the cryogenic cooling to actually cold soak all those areas that they need to make sure that they are cold, and they're going to use those other sensors to back all of that up. Weather so far, as of today, was at 60% go for launch on September 3rd. 86 degrees Fahrenheit at the time of launch, 2:17 p.m. Eastern Time, 9 to 13 mile an hour winds. And the good thing is that there's an offshore to the west, some showers developing, but it looks like it's going to stay in that area and not go over to where Cape Canaveral is. So it's actually going to provide them less chance of thunderstorms and electrical issues near the pad, which is good. On Monday, if they do have to push it, it's September 5th, it would be 70% go for launch as of today. And they're saying that right now, weather's not expected to be an issue. So that's good. That's very good. We just hope that everything goes well with the rest of the countdown, because again, they haven't even gone through all of it yet. So as great as it'll be to get through this next spot, there's so much unknown that they haven't seen before, that if they hit another wall of, we don't know what this is telling us, this is out of what the theory is, what the simulation is going to show us, this could mean that we only start inching closer and closer towards T0. And it's frustrating, but it's the reality of where we are with this. So it's a balance. They're catching up, learning a lot of things very, very quickly. And I think I'm looking forward to getting out there and enjoying that experience again, getting our long distance lens up, and maybe, who knows, with being on the shore and being in a less crowded area, who knows, I may be able to live stream it. But if not, we will be able to share a lot of that later. And just like we've done on this podcast here, we'll be able to put that up and you'll be able to see it and we'll be able to talk about it. And yeah, that's pretty much it, folks. Thank you for joining us for a special Florida edition of the podcast. Looking forward to the launch. If you guys have any questions about anything, please hit us up. todayinspacepodcast@gmail.com, todayinspacepod on Instagram, todayinspace on TikTok, and todayinspacepod on Twitter. Hit us up. Let us know your questions. If you have any questions about what it's like going to see a launch, any recommendations, or any questions about Space Launch System and what NASA's doing and what SpaceX is doing, please hit us up. We'd love to add that into our podcast. So and share the love, spread love, and spread science, as we say here. So I'll be getting ready to sleep over for my third rocket launch, as long as things go well. Really, really looking forward to it, and I wish the NASA team all the best. They've got a lot of work on their plates, and they are capable of doing it. They need to get through this next stage. So I hope everything goes well with launch. I'll be there to watch it and be there. And till then, be well, spread love, and spread science. And we'll see you on the next episode of Today in Space. Go Artemis 1. Please launch. Have a good one, everybody.